Joining us on the Western Hotline, senior writer for The Athletic on the Bears, covering the Bears, Kevin Fishbain joins us. Kevin, good morning. It's Jeremy and Joe. Thanks for taking some time today.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
We're all right. We're all right.
Is it odd that a team would have two joint practices in the same offseason? Because they just had one with the Dolphins, right?
Yeah, it's the first time I've experienced it. I will say in past years they'll have two joint practices with the same team. So maybe in their mind, they're having the same number of joint practices, just one with a team, one with another team.
Yeah.
Detroit was big on joint practices, did not play their guys a lot in the preseason. That's where Ben Johnson's coming from. That's where maybe this kind of sparked. And then taking advantage of the fact that they have the back-to-back home preseason games, they kind of decided might as well. But, yeah, it is a little unique.
Kevin, on Ben Johnson, is he the sexiest coach candidate of the last 5 years? I mean, he'd been a candidate that I'm sure a lot of fan bases out there thought, this guy, look what he did for Detroit, look what he did for Jared Goff. How has it gone over in his first offseason and preseason here so far?
I do think the proximity here to being in the same division in Detroit certainly heightened that allure of Ben Johnson. But you're right. I mean, this was somebody who we thought was going to take that Washington job a couple of years ago, and then was, right there with Jacksonville and the Raiders this time around as well. And, yeah, I mean, when people ask me about how things are going with the Bears, I usually kind of start with him because right now it's been very impressive what he's, kind of what he's instilled. Now, I should note that this is my 13th year covering the Bears and my 5th head coach. So now, you guys in Buffalo, you've had a lot of stability right now, but I know there was certainly a time in Bill's era where you're familiar with that kind of ratio of coaches to seasons. So, I want to temper things a little bit, but just based on what we've seen in camp, the way players have responded, the way camp has been run, has been impressive. And the other thing with Ben Johnson, compared to almost every other coach I've covered here, is the guy has done it. And by done it, I mean he's called plays at an incredibly high level. And the Bears, at least, have never had that.
Obviously, job number one is getting Caleb Williams to a good spot. How big of a lift is that after year one? Was it as bad as it looked? Was it? I don't want to make that sound like it looked very, very bad, but where is Caleb Williams coming from after year one? I guess is a better way to ask that.
Yeah, it's, like in some ways you want to say this is like his rookie year all over again. Ben Johnson said they've kind of almost told him to forget everything he learned. Like you got to wipe away some of the things he was taught last year, and you're almost starting over. But the flip side of that is, they spent a lot of money and a lot of capital on 3 interior offensive linemen. They signed Grady Jarrett. They used a first-round pick and a second-round pick on skill players. This is a team that wants to compete right now. They've got a couple Pro Bowlers on the defensive side of the ball. So, maybe 5-10 years ago, you'd sit there and go, okay, quarterbacks, we can have a little bit more patience and see this thing through and watch him learn a new offense and all that. But, he's this guy's number one pick. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. He came out of college with such great accolades. You'd like to see this happen quicker. And, the Jaden Daniels and C.J. Strouds of the world make it a little harder to be patient. So there's obviously all eyes are on him. Camp has been bumpy. And, there have been some nice flashes. I think we're seeing what it's like to learn a really detailed offense, and they've admitted they're throwing a ton at him. They want training camp to be super difficult to get him ready for what he's going to see in the regular season. But, hey, you guys know full well. I mean, look, Josh Allen, I was saying this yesterday, he used to be the unicorn, and in some ways I think he still is in terms of what happened to him his first year and what he has turned into. I do think that quarterbacks are now, you have your Baker Mayfields and Geno Smiths out there. I'd like to think it's more likely for guys these days to struggle early on, and then you get a new coach or new play call or even a new team and you figure it out. But for a while, it was like there's Josh Allen and there's nobody else. And so I think Bears fans are going to think about, looking ahead to this weekend, Josh Allen's going to come to town. They can probably say, well, Josh's first year was tough. So was Caleb Williams, that maybe he's an example of what things could be in terms of a best case scenario.
Kevin, what I wonder about him is the sacks. He led the league in sacks last year. It felt like every week that was happening. And is Ben Johnson, what do you think he's trying to neuter that completely? Because at the same time, I feel like a lot of his special plays in college and last year, he is holding on to the ball. So I don't know, how do you think that looks? I can't imagine they don't want to at least improve it, though.
Yeah, I wondered last year, there was a game late in the season in San Francisco, which was just a horrendous loss. And there were times in that game where you felt like Caleb Williams was escaping the pocket too quickly. I just remember sitting there in the press box and being like, you've got some time. But there was just such a lack of trust in the offensive line. I don't know about the scheme so much, but he at that point he was on his second playbook and second head coach, so you got to imagine there was a lot going on in his head. And I do think that having these reinforcements coming in the middle is going to help him feel more comfortable to stay in the pocket and make those plays, so he doesn't have to kind of run around or back up. And then having guys like a Colson Loveland and Luther Burden to pair with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and Cole Kmet, again, it's all about building that trust level that he's got to feel better about getting that football out of his hands because he knows the guys are out there. But as you said, Caleb is a magician outside the pocket. So, I think that's where Ben Johnson's going to come in and, how do we balance this, right? How do we take a guy who is just magnificent when he is on the move versus, he just took too many sacks. It's harder to do that in the NFL than it was in college, and we got to figure out the proper balance. And I go back to Ben Johnson. Look, Jared Goff, certainly no one's confusing him for somebody that's doing a lot of work outside the pocket, but Ben Johnson just being this play caller, being this guy who knows how to put points on the board, I think there's a lot of hope that he's the right guy to kind of bring those two sides of Caleb Williams together.
Looking at their weapons around them, you mentioned some of them. How big a leap for Rome Odunze should people expect in year two?
Yeah, Rome Odunze, you look at his rookie season and you wonder how much of that was, you looked at what Brian Thomas did in Jacksonville and Malik Neighbors in New York and Bowers in Las Vegas, and I kind of, you kind of looked at Rome Odunze like, why weren't your numbers there? Well, then also you remember the offense was a mess. He was one of the best players in fourth down in the league last year. I think he's got just an incredible skill set, and work ethic is all there. So there is reason to think that that's someone who could really take off. He's had a nice camp so far, but it's also been hard, guys, like this passing game. I got some recency bias as I'm talking to you right now. Like yesterday's practice was pretty rough. So there's been some trouble with a lot of these guys getting on the same page. So, you're trying to figure out what's this going to look like when it's actually the regular season and they've actually got this specific install, specific playbook for this specific game. But Odunze is that guy where he has all the makings of somebody who absolutely takes off in year two, but because he's a wide receiver, that takeoff in year two is dependent on his quarterback also taking a leap in his second season.
Kevin Fishbain joining us on the Worcester Hotline. One last one, have a request here from a Bills fan to ask about our old friend Tmaine Edmonds and how things have gone there for him.
I think Edmonds had a really good camp. Last year was, I'd say, somewhat disappointing for him when you consider what his skill set is and his age and his salary and what he did in 2023. There were people looking right now and trying to figure out, okay, looking at his cap number for next year, how is this going to work? How much longer is he going to be here? Because I think he tied a career low in tackles for loss last season. And look, everything fell apart with last year's team. So I always want to take a lot of the stuff that happened in the second half with a grain of salt. But he's had a good camp. He has been very noticeable. An interception against the Dolphins last week in joint practices. He's been out there every day. I think last year he had to miss some time in camp with something here or there. He's had a bunch of tackles for losses. He's been more noticeable in camp this year to a point where you should feel good about where he's at. I was looking at him yesterday. He's still 27. And that was a guy who I remember, we kind of had him knocked to the Bears a lot in that 2018 draft. The year they ended up taking Roquan Smith, another off-ball linebacker. So I think he's at a good camp. I think fans were very frustrated with his lack of splash plays last season. But the summer has left me hopeful for what he can do this year.
Very good. Kevin Fishbain on the Bears.
Is a good season for them just making the playoffs? Like a second place finish. It's a tough division. So like if they finish in second and make the playoffs, is everybody happy there?
Yeah, I think a playoff appearance would make people very pleased. That would be, you're not exceeding expectations by a massive amount, but if you can get to the playoffs with this team, I think people feel really, really good. And I've said this about multiple Bears teams, about multiple first-round quarterbacks. If you're a Bears fan in January, you want to feel that Caleb is just on this ascent, that like you want to feel comfortable. You don't want me to be answering you guys asked at this time next summer about Caleb, because you want to know that he's on this upward trajectory. So that's kind of most important. But if they make the playoffs, he probably is. So if they get to the postseason as a wild card, I think people feel really good about that as Ben Johnson's first year.
Very good. Kevin Fishbain, senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Bears. Kevin, thanks very much, and enjoy the week of more practice, the joint practice, then, of course, Sunday's game.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Kevin.